Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the War Room Podcast. I'm Alvin Gutierrez, and I'm your host for this podcast. Our guest for today is Kyle Benner. He started his journey with Global Infusion in 2008 by volunteering and interning with Global Infusion for 7 years. After graduating from the university with his degree in Intercultural Studies, he is now working as a staff at Global Infusion as the Infusion Adventures Coordinator. Kyle has been a team leader for over 30 teams around the world, including Guatemala, Egypt, Philippines, Ghana, Thailand, Mexico, Peru, and Kenya. In 2020, Kyle completed his master's in global studies from Liberty University. He is currently pursuing his doctoral studies or PhD in intercultural studies at the Assemblies of God Theological Seminary or AGTS in Springfield, Missouri. Kyle's wife, Bethany, is the administrative assistant to the children's department at Park West Church, Knoxville, Tennessee. Kyle and Bethany work together in missions and ministry overseas and locally. They have three boys, Isaac, Nathan, and Andrew. This is part one of a two-part episode series on decoding the blessing strategy. Please stay tuned until the end of this episode to know on how to join and win our free book giveaway. Also, a quick note, this is a video cast, so you might want to check the video version of this podcast on Spotify. And so without further ado, let us go to the war room. Hello, Kyle. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. How are you and where are you in the world at the moment?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to our time together today. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and excited to share some wisdom that I've learned over the years.
Awesome. On this podcast, we begin by knowing more about our guests. So, if anyone's unaware, where are you born and raised, and have you always wanted to be a missionary or you had other dreams or plans in mind?
So I was born in Georgia here in the United States, and the week I was born, my dad got a job offer at a chemical company here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and so we moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and was raised here my life. And I started out as a Christian and went to church very regularly. Didn't really have any plans to do ministry. Wanted to actually be an engineer or a physical therapist to work on people that had injuries, sports medicine, stuff like that. But in life, and as time went on, have some stories and testimonies of when God just intervened in my life and then just radically changed the direction of my life. And so, about the age of 16 years old, is when I really felt this call to ministry and call to become a missionary and serve overseas. And that's a little bit about my story. We can jump into that if we get time, but we'll probably have to jump into our leadership topic today, and we're looking forward to doing that.
Awesome. Now, for everyone's information, I met Kyle last 2015 as they visited our church in one of their mission trips. He came with other missionaries from Global Infusion, and they conducted several feeding programs and evangelistic gatherings to share the love of God in various areas. Now, let me start, brother, by asking you what is Global Infusion and what is the organization's mission, vision, and the activities, and how did you get involved with it?
Yeah, for sure. So, Global Infusion is a mission sending agency that helps short term, long term families, individuals to get placed around the world to do mission trips or mission commitments. So, whether that be for a year, 5 years, or 10 years. So, what we do is we work with churches, universities, and people that are interested in the call to missions but don't have a way to get there. So we partner with local indigenous pastors in 20 nations around the world, from Asia to Africa, Europe, Central South America, and in the States as well. And we connect with these contacts, and they have a vision to reach their nation for Jesus Christ. And so we partner alongside of them, just like I partner alongside Pastor Richard there in the Philippines. And we work together to help grow the kingdom. That's the ultimate goal. And each of our contacts has a different vision and strategy to go about doing that. So we partner alongside of these churches and universities, get them prepared, all the logistics, all the planning, all the training. And then we send them overseas, and then they go for 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, a year. And then we have our long termers that go 1, 10 years like that. So that's a little bit about Global Infusion. We work out of the United States. That's our headquarters, but we have sent teams from all over to all over. I have a team from Peru going to the country of Nepal. So we have different teams going to different places all around the world, but we're mainly headquartered out of the United States. And then we help these churches and universities, youth groups, and individuals and families to get to fulfill the commission of the Great Commission.
Now, as you may know, this podcast focuses on the leadership lessons and wisdom from our guests. And as a missionary, of course, you have a wide array of experiences and learnings from your mission trips. This is very interesting as this is the first time we'll be hearing from a missionary. So we're all ears to you, brother. Now, can you share to us what are the leadership lessons or wisdom that you have gleaned from your mission trips? And also, what are the leadership qualities which you have acquired and became useful to you as a missionary and as a leader?
Yeah, for sure. So, in missions and cross-cultural ministry, you will get to engage in cultures all around the world, which is a beautiful thing. You get to learn about people and the creations that God has created. And so, with that, there comes challenges and obstacles. And so, a lot of my experience and what I'll be sharing with us today is things that I've learned, things I've done wrong. Somebody asked me once, how are you such a good leader? And I said, well, because I've done it wrong many times. And so I've learned from those bad experiences to create formulas and strategies. And a lot of it is learning from others on how to be successful in work cross-culturally. So a lot of what we'll talk to today is some cross-cultural leadership, biblical leadership, and servant leadership. And so those kind of three major categories. The topic of leadership is a wonderful topic that you can go in many different directions. And so from my experience, I've gotten to do biblical leadership, lead like Christ. I've been able to do cross-cultural leadership, working with different cultures through leadership, and that has its own dynamics. And then one of my favorites is servant leadership, leading like Christ, who is a servant. So those are kind of the areas that I've learned a lot from the years. Got to go over 30 cross-cultural trips over my time to many different places around the world. So a lot to learn, but a lot of it is a learning experience. There's never a day that I don't learn something new. And each trip that I go on, I learn something and add it to my tools of resources and abilities.
Hey there, sorry to interrupt. Promise this will be quick. We'd just like to thank you all our dear sponsors who have generously supported this podcast. Thank you for helping us with our mission to help more young and emerging leaders to love deeper, live stronger, and lead better. If you are interested in supporting this podcast, please click the listener support in our Spotify main page or send us an email at thewarumdesk@gmail.com. We'll be more than happy to give you the available options to sponsor an episode or the entire podcast itself. Also, we are partnering with various rural communities and public schools as our primary beneficiaries for the sponsorship proceed. Imagine you can learn for yourself and help others at the same time. Don't miss this awesome opportunity. Partner with us now. Thank you. Now, back to the show. Peace out.
Amazing. Now, in our pre-recording discussion, you mentioned about the concept of the blessing strategy. I'm so interested about it. Can you walk us through that concept and what are the impacts that you can provide to our leaders who are watching and listening right now?
Yeah, for sure. So when we were talking about kind of what topic will we talk about today, I want to go back to one of the scriptures found in Genesis chapter 12. Some will say that Abraham was probably one of the first missionaries because the Lord said, go from your people, go from your land, and I will make you a great nation. I will make you a great people. And it says, you'll be blessed. And that blessing is to be a blessing to others. And so the leadership strategy that I want to talk with us today is called a blessing strategy. I actually have a resource here. It's a book. It's called Bless. And what we'll do is we may do a giveaway at the end of the podcast, and we'll figure out how we can do that.
Awesome.
So someone can get this book. It's a strategy that's based on this Abrahamic covenant coming out of Genesis 12, 1 through 3. And there's a pastor out of Chicago here in the States that came up with this strategy. And we're going to break down each one of these letters. It's an acronym for BLESS. And we'll break that down today. And it's a lot of fun, but we'll get you that resource. If you want to check that out, His name's Dave Ferguson, and we'll add that in with some podcast notes for you later.
That's so good, brother. Thank you so much. Now, since we're talking about blessings, can you briefly define what is blessing or what is a blessing and what does it mean to be a blessing? Also, expounding on what you have just discussed, how can one seize that opportunity to become a blessing to others?
Yeah, for sure. So, in leadership, we are blessed with a lot of gifts and talents and resources. One, we're given the ability to lead others. We're given the ability to pour into other people. That's one thing about leadership that I really value is leadership shouldn't just be what I can get out of it. It's what I can give into others. And so this blessing is essentially one, first off, God blesses us with many things, resources, health, physical, mental, emotional. There's so many things that we are grateful and blessed to have. And as a leader, we shouldn't hold on to those things. We should say, okay, God, thank you for these things. And we thank you that we have the opportunity to lead others. And we're going to take these leadership components and then we're going to impart them and bless them. That's actually why we chose the word global infusion. The word infuse is infusing the people with a resource. The full definition is wonderful if you can get a chance to look it up. And it's infusing them to the embetterment. And so as a leader, we get the opportunity to take what we have, skills, knowledge, resources, and then we get the opportunity to pour that out into others. And so that's just a small glimpse of what blessing is. And so for this particular acronym, this acronym breaks down those 5 letters. And so what we'll do today is we'll break down 5 of these letters and kind of share a little bit about each one. So if you want to take notes or if you're listening in, it's really easy to follow because it's an acronym. And that's why I like acronyms, because you can kind of remember them. So the very first one, the letter B, is actually a 3-word one. It's begin with prayer. In leadership, we can break this down more when we break down each one, but in leadership, the impact of prayer is very crucial. It's our launching pad, it's our beginning. The second one for the L is listen. As a leader, we have to learn to listen. And I got another resource for you today. This is a wonderful book. Why Don't We Listen Better? This is actually a psychology book in my master's program. I took a class on pastoral care and counseling. And one of the biggest things we can do in life is listen. So we're going to give this away as a giveaway as well in the podcast today. And then the other one is E, and that's E for eat. And that's such a fun thing to do. We all love to eat, and it's a great way to fellowship, and we'll break that down as well. And then next is the S, and that is to serve. Find ways to serve others, serve people, serve the community. And then the last S is share your story. And so those are the 5 words or 5 components we're going to focus on today in this blessing strategy. B, begin with prayer. L, listen. E, eat. S, serve. And S, share your story.
Okay, so thank you for laying down that foundation for our discussion. Now, can you start? Can you begin now by discussing each and every letter of that word "bless"
Yes,
to
for
all
sure.
of our viewers, so that we could, and if you could also give some examples to it, so that we could concretely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to start with B, begin with prayer, and I'm going to share some stories from each one of my trips, some different trips around the world. So I'm going to start with a story from Kenya. So in my undergraduate program for missions, we did a 3-month internship overseas, and I was selected to go to the country of Kenya, and I was in charge of leading a team of 7. And I was the youngest one on the team, but I was asked to be the leader because I had the most experience. And it was very challenging because other people thought that they should have been the leader. And I actually had one member confront me and said, Kyle, I don't think you should be the leader. And I said, okay, how do I accept that? I appreciate the transparency, but how do I go about doing this. So I said, okay, God, I'm going to pray about this. Lord, I need your wisdom. In James, it talks about if you lack wisdom, ask and it shall be given to you. So I took this as an opportunity to pray. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed. And every time before I go on a trip, I try to take a minute and fast. And fasting is where you go without something. Typically, it's without food, but there are different things you can fast. And for this particular fast, the Lord said, give up your bed. I want you to sleep on the floor. So I slept on the floor, and that was very challenging because when you're used to a mattress and then you're sleeping on the floor, it's not as comfortable. So I did that, and what I found out is because I slept on the floor, it was easier to wake up early in the morning to pray. So every morning I would get up and begin my day with prayer. So this was before the trip. So I pray and pray and pray to help my day and get started. And then on the trip, the entire 3 months, I slept on the floor. And it made it really easy that when my alarm clock went off at 6 o'clock in the morning, 1 hour before I wanted to get up at 7 o'clock, I would take that 6 o'clock hour to 7 o'clock hour and begin my day with prayer. Every day, I had to pray, God, give me wisdom, give me clarity, give me direction, help me lead my team, help me lead the people, help me share Christ. And so I started that and continued that. And so for that whole trip, I began with prayer. And as crazy as this is, at the very last week of our trip, a team member that had confronted me at the very beginning of our experience, almost 1 year prior to that, said, Cal, I want to ask for forgiveness. And she shared with our whole team, she said, I don't know if anybody in this team knows this, but I actually confronted Cal that he was not qualified to be the leader. And she said, I would go on any trip and you can be my leader.
Wow.
And it was nothing of myself. It was being obedient to taking every day and beginning with prayer. And when we do that, we align ourselves to see, okay, God, what I need to accomplish today. There's several greats out there like John Wesley. He says, we're too busy not to pray. Prayer is so important in guiding us through our steps and through our day. So that would be my challenge for each of you today is, hey, when you get into a situation, when you get into any kind of leadership role, everything should begin with prayer. So when we do that, whether you're a leader, whether you're a follower, in any phase you're in, beginning with prayer puts us in the right attitude, the right alignment to go about being a blessing to others. When we can hear from God, when we can be in tune, then it gives us that clarity so that we can be a blessing to those around us. So that would be the first one for us today.
Okay, then let's go to the letter L.
Okay, so L is one of the most challenging things to do in this world. Listen, because all of us want to have the microphone and not take the time to listen. This is something that I've learned a lot over the years. One, I've learned it in leadership. Two, I've learned it in my marriage, in my relationship with my wife. And three, now with having 3 boys at home, I've learned how to listen as a father. So listening is awesome. I'm so grateful I took this class and this is a phenomenal text. I really, really recommend it. Why don't we listen better? It's got, I don't even know how many strategies. I think it's in like the 20s or 30s, different strategies on how to listen better. It's a really great resource. Okay, so here's the thing. In my master's or my undergraduate, I can't remember, one of my teachers said, it's kind of cool how God created us. He said, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. And he said, we're to listen twice as much as we are to speak. And he's like, that's why you have 2 of them. And so as a leader, one of the things we have to do is listen to those around us. One, we have to listen to those that are following us, and we have to listen to the environment and the audience that's around us, because we can totally miss out on something when we think we know what's the right thing to do, when really we should have just been listening from the very beginning. In this book, and there's all kinds of things: active listening, call and response, clarifying, asking questions. So you can ask questions to probe good listening. And as a leader, if we don't listen to our followers, we don't listen to those around us, we're going to miss the mark every time. And so one of the testimonies I want to share with you and stories I want to share with you comes from the country of Thailand. And we were doing during one of my trips, it was actually 2019. We were leading a team and we were doing ministry. And at the end of the day, or sometimes at the beginning of the day, we do what's called debriefing. So we kind of discuss kind of what went on, how we can improve, how we can grow. This is a side note nugget. We call them pros and grows instead of positives and negatives, because pros are things we do well and grows are things we can improve in. Instead of looking at it as a negative, you can look at it as a grow. So we were doing a pros and grows. We were doing a debrief. And that morning I woke up, began with prayer, and the Lord said, during our debrief at breakfast, take coloring pages. So we were doing David and Goliath coloring pages as one of our stories. And so I'm like, okay, this is so random that I'm going to group with all adults and I'm going to take coloring pages to our debrief. So I pass out the coloring pages and everybody's got their crayons and they're coloring in their things. Well, I completely forgot. I had an architect on my team. I had a doctor of psychology on my team, and I had all these people, and they were coloring in their coloring based off emotions and feelings and things they had experienced. And the architect was thinking about all these things. And so we were taking all of this time, and through this moment, they were getting to process their trip through a coloring page. And I was like, wow, I felt like this was going to be such a terrible experience. And it was exactly what they needed. And so listening has so many different ways. Obviously, in this scenario, is listening to God, listening to the Holy Spirit say, do a coloring page. And I was like, this is really weird, but I'm just going to do it. I'm going to obey. And then, we did it. We did the experience, and it was a really great time. And if I had missed that listening opportunity, then we would have missed that interaction and exchange. And what's really cool about listening, one of my Old Testament teachers in my undergraduate, Dr. Moore, was incredible. We were taking a class just on the book of Deuteronomy, and he was talking about the Hebrew word heed, Heed. And this heed word is a really cool word. This is kind of a compound word. First off, it's a listening. We must heed the voice of God. Heed is not only just listening, but then it's obeying and putting that listening into action. And oftentimes, as a leader, we can hear things, but we never put those things into action. And so that's a challenge for a lot of us. We have to hear those around us. We have to hear from other leaders, wisdom from those before us, elders. We must respect those things, but we must listen. We must listen to God. We must listen to our environment. But then it's our responsibility to put these things now into action. And that's a very challenging thing for us. And so the word obey, this is really cool too. So listen and obey. The word obey is actually, when you really dive deep into it, is a listening with actions. So it's amazing. Not only as leaders, we have to listen, but these listening has to put us into action. And so I love these first ones. Begin with prayer and listen. So two simplistic things for us to do in our leadership.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, just to before we go to the third letter, just to ask you quickly about listening. So, how do you think the skill of listening could help us become better leaders in any context at all?
Yeah, for sure. So in any context, if we listen, if we take time to listen, then we can hear what people are hurting, struggling, what they're needing help for. Oftentimes there's actually two levels of power. There's called hierarchy and egalitarian. If you look at Gerrit Hofstede, he's out of I think he's German. No, he's not German. He's I can't think of where he's at, but he's in Europe, German, somewhere in that area. So he has these cultural power distance. He talks about all these different cross-cultural things. And one of the things is hierarchy versus egalitarian. So hierarchy is you have all these levels of leadership, of power. The other one is power is kind of divided among all. And I think there's a need for a kind of a mix of both of them. And oftentimes in leadership or in our environment, we can be so hierarchical that we don't think we need to listen to those below us. But really, those below us are actually the ones that have the advice, the strategies, the ideas, that if we would just take the time to listen, it would actually make us more diverse, more contextual to the audience, because they're more aware of what's going on those other levels. So that egalitarian is when you sit around like let's just say a table or a round table. That means that when you're listening to those around you, you're actually saying, okay, I value your input. Thank you for sharing it. Let me take note of it, and let's apply some of those things. In a hierarchy, someone may say, oh, I have an idea. They say it and they shut them down immediately. Well, what's going to happen? They're never going to raise their hand again. They're never going to share in the meeting again, because they're not going to feel comfortable to share or lead. But if you take that moment and someone's like, I have an idea, and you're like, let's hear it. And you take that time and you say, oh, that's a great idea. That's a great, how can we apply that? How can we address that? How can we add that? So on a practical level, it's listening and allowing others to share. One thing we talk about are circles are better than rows. So like rows would be like in a school system where someone's at a whiteboard and the students are in rows. And, that's a hierarchy. You got the hierarchy of the teacher and the students in rows. Whereas a circle allows us to be all together and we're more on the same plane. So in leadership, if you've always led and you're in a meeting or in leadership and everybody's sitting in rows, get in a circle and try something different and have that conversation where everybody feels like, oh, I'm on the same plane as those, even though there's others that are of higher rank with us. So that's some basic ways you could do that. No matter what environment or culture you're in.
Wow, I totally agree with you, brother. And especially as a leader, that skill of listening is very important, because it's not that you lead only by talking or just by, words, but at some point you need to also listen to your people, because listening to them might really give you an idea or even bring out the best idea that you haven't thought of as a leader. So you don't have that monopoly of knowledge at all, or monopoly of wisdom. And through listening, you're making an idea or a concept better, and you're enabling, also you're empowering. That's the term of empowering the people, or empowering your members every time you listen to them, because there's a value of trust, there's empowerment, and there's also engagement at some point. Now, before we jump to the third letter, let me just quickly make a follow-up question. How do you resist, or how can we resist as leaders to have that, what they call selective listening, or to shift from selective listening to active listening?
Yeah.
Or is there any way that we could, fight that urge?
So one of the things, what I would encourage in active listening is this right here, taking notes. Oftentimes somebody will share something and you're just like looking at them and you're like, are they really remembering everything I'm telling them? Is it even possible that the entire conversation they can do? Now, some people are gifted in that way, but one of the things in active listening is you're actively taking notes, you're actively writing things down, and then you can ask questions. Be like, oh, you mentioned this. Can you clarify that? Can you expound on that a little bit more? And that is showing that active listening that says, okay, I've taken these notes, I've just shared these things. Oh, in that acronym, I missed that letter E. I caught it, it's E, but what were you saying about this? That shows everybody around you, oh, wow, they actually took notes. They actually found a way. Now, obviously, people take notes different ways. I'm old school. I like my pen and paper. I like my writing things down. But others, they like their computer or their tablet or their phone or something like that. Only thing I don't like about technology, and I'm old school in this, is technology can look like, hey, I'm over here texting. I'm over here texting. Oh, are they texting or are they writing notes? Well, you can clarify whether they're texting or writing notes, because if you're on a piece of paper, you're not texting anybody unless you're writing a snail mail letter to somebody and sending it in the mail. So one of the things I do like about kind of some of the old school strategies, and even against computers, is when you're writing down on a pad and paper, there's no nonverbal miscommunications. So if I'm on my phone or on my computer, they may be thinking, oh, they're just typing an email. Well, really, I'm actually writing the notes down, but they can't know that because they're over there and I'm over here. Whereas if you have a pen and paper, you have a journal, you have a book, a pad, it's obvious that you're working on that. So one of the things I like to do anytime I go into a conversation, or I like to bring, I have just a basic journal, but that I carry in a notepad and one pen, and I just go in there and jot those notes down. There's no miscommunication in that component. So that's one of the active listening things that I like to do, is I like to write things down.
Fantastic. Let's now go to the letter E, the third
Oh, I
letter.
love E. Who doesn't like to eat? So what I love about the letter E, and Dave talks about this in his book, is eating. Now, depending on where you're at in the world, some people eat 2 meals a day and some people eat 3 meals a day. Whether you do morning, afternoon, or 3 meals, those are designated times you already have in your schedule to be an opportunity to bless others. So there's 2 ways you can go about doing this. Number one, you could take somebody out to lunch. So you say, hey, I want to take you, Alvin, out to lunch. Let's go out to lunch, and I'm going to buy your lunch today. Well, that's a blessing that I can be of just like giving somebody a free meal. That's one way. The other way is you're taking that very specific time to get to know somebody. Times over lunches and coffees, or going out for dessert, or cake, or ice cream, or any of those different things, go out to breakfast together. Those are times where you're saying, I intentionally want to get to know you. I intentionally want to learn more of your story. I want to get to talk to you. And that's a great way that you get to listen. You get to say, hey, let's go out to have lunch together. And in that time, you get to know one another on a different level. Meeting in an office space, or meeting in an organized structure or a business, or there's always those boundaries and barriers. You break that by going to a restaurant, inviting them over to dinner. That's a really cool one as well, is inviting people into your own house. My wife and I, we try to do that, and we invite people over, and we have them over for a home cooked meal. And it's just a great time to get to know each other. And it's actually extremely biblical. Christ was constantly eating with people, going to other people, fellowshipping together, because there's just so much that accomplishes over food. And there's just this barrier that gets broken, that this is not work. This is not a leader. This is a time of fellowship. This is a time to learn and grow and get to know each other on a very basic level, without like any strings attached in a sense. So eating is a phenomenal one. And for eating, I want to share a story from Guatemala. So Guatemala is probably the place I've been the most. I've been 10 or 12 times. I can't even remember now. And it's kind of like my home away from home overseas. And I love going there. And over time, and many years of getting to go, this last time I was actually there during COVID in 2020. And after one of the services, I said, let's just take anybody that wants to go out to church out to lunch. So we went out to this restaurant, and I got the opportunity to buy everybody's lunch that day. And that was just the small thing. But the bigger part was, when we got done with lunch, the pastor came to me and said, Kyle, we've been here, 20 something years. And we've done some lunch things like this before, but the people have never been as open as they've been today. They've just had a great time of just eating together. And that didn't happen overnight. And this was like my 10th or 11th time. But it was a time where we got to just have fun with one another and talk with one another. And what was really cool about that is every single one of them, because I bought their lunch that day, they're like, we want to have you over to say thank you for having us a lunch. We want to make you lunch. So I had like 4 or 5 lunch appointments arranged the rest of that month. I was there for a month, and they were all inviting me over, and they had like the best food in the world, home cooked food. But food just allows for great fellowship. We actually do that here at our local church here. Every 3 months, we have what's called a food and fellowship night, where we have international food. We have 3 international congregations at our church. We have an Arabic service, we have a Slavic service in Russian, and we have a Spanish service, bilingual Spanish service, plus our English one. So all 4 of these congregations every 3 months get together, and we all bring food from all of our nations and have a food and fellowship night. We have 300 or 400 people show up to these events, and they're a phenomenal time. And it's the most culture shock for the Americans because, you know, they love food and fellowship. But for Americans, we're not used to that. So we'll start like 6 o'clock and we end at like 10 o'clock at night. They're like, that was a 4 hour thing. It felt like 4 minutes. I'm like, that's what food does. It's just a time to fellowship with another. So we really love that. I really encourage you, any opportunity you get, to find ways to eat with your employees, eat with those that are following you, fellowship with them, invite them over to your house, have a great time at restaurants, find ways to bless them by even buying it for them. But it's not always just about buying it for them. It's about just being time together with them. And that's a great way to listen. Like going back to that, it's a great time to hear from those around you what you need to hear.
Well, I think every listener and viewer right now will be saying a resounding yes to that letter E for eating. And I guess you have gained so much pounds eating carnitas or
Yeah,
tacos at that time.
yeah.
And I
And
don't mind,
coffee.
yeah, you don't mind extra pounds, right? When you
Yeah.
have that fellowship.
Yeah, and you can always go the coffee route. You know, you can, hey, let's meet up at a coffee shop and go from there and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fun ways to go about doing that. I really do encourage that, and that would be even a simplistic challenge. I'm going to leave a challenge for you guys at the end of this, but that is something you can easily apply. So, for example, if you have 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, you have 21 opportunities to be a blessing to others. You do 2 meals a week at 7 days, that's 14. So you have 14 opportunities already in your schedule. You don't have to find time for that. That's what's really cool about the eating one. A lot of things in leadership, you're like, man, I've got to add this to my existing schedule. I've got to add some, like, oh man, these people give us these great wisdoms. I've got to add this. We're not adding anything. We have to eat at some point. Now, some of us eat more and some of us eat less, but eating is a part of our already routine. So we're just capitalizing on something that's already in our schedule, and we don't have to add anything to our schedule. So I really like that about eating.
Right. You can never go wrong with food.
No.
So now let's go to the double S's. Let's begin with the first S.
Yeah, so the first S is serve. I love serve. Serving is one of the most challenging things that a leader has to do, because most time leaders, it takes a long time to get into leadership. You've had to work your way up the system. And then when you get up there, you're like, finally, I don't have to do any work anymore. I'm done. You know, I've got to this pedestal. But really, when a leader takes the time and serves and says, I am grateful for the leadership and the followers and everything, but you say, you know what? I am going to take time to serve the whole time while I'm a leader. It empowers and it gives credit to all those that are serving under you and serving with you. And so this is a very biblical term. You know, Mark 10:45, Christ did not come to be served, but to serve. Philippians 2, Christ in the very nature of God, who could have elevated himself to the highest position, humbled himself to a servant. And so serving can look very different in everywhere you go and every way you do it. So for example, if you are in a church or a setting and you have a large event and you go and you have a great time and you fellowship with people, say for example this food and fellowship night, you fellowship with people, you've cooked, you've ate with them, and at 10 o'clock everybody's leaving, but your team stays behind to clean up. And as a leader, you have all rights to just leave. You could leave because you've empowered other people for the cleanup. However, if you say, I value this event so much that I'm going to stay, I'm going to clean up the chairs, I'm going to put up the tables, I'm going to take out the trash, and you're doing that with your team, wow, it speaks volumes to those around you. And they say, I want to follow this leader because this leader not only sets up a good event, organizes a good event, but they're willing to take out the trash. They're willing to do all those things. And so it's a very unique model because a lot of leaders, when they get in the high positions, they say, I don't need to serve anymore. I've got a team that does that. I can pay somebody to do that. Why would I take out the trash? I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO, I'm the top dog. I shouldn't be doing that. When your people can see you saying, I'm going down to the grassroots, I'm going down to the lowest of lows, and I'm going to serve them. How can I help them? How can I listen to them? How can I take them out to lunch? It's a powerful experience. One of the stories I'd like to share from my trips is this past year I got to go to Istanbul, Turkey, and connected with our contact there. And it was a very new, groundbreaking site. It was one of the first times we'd been there, and we had this. We actually were planning, like, okay, I'm jumping way back. So this is February 24th, 2022, and we were scheduled to go to Ukraine and do a men's conference on empowering men. That is the day the war broke out. So 2 days prior to our trip, we rerouted our whole team to Turkey. So it was a very last minute change, and they were flexible, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'll take you." So we come there, and so we had no schedule. And so we get there, and what is the first thing I do? Begin with prayer. Second, listen. Third, eat with them. In the very first night, very first meal, I listened to everything he said. Mark, I was like, "Okay, Mark, what do you have? What do you have? What do you have?" So I'm listening, I'm absorbing. And I said, "Okay, this is how we're going to serve you." And then the very next day, we're at something, he shared something. "This is how we're going to serve you." And he's like, you guys don't have to do that. He's like, and I'm like, "What do you want to accomplish?" And he's like, "Well, we really need this, 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 and done." He's like, "But that's not what we had talked about." He said, "But based off what you just said and what you just said and what you just said, this is what you really need done." He's like, "I never thought of that. That's really what we need to do." So we took our whole schedule that was planned A, B, C, D, and we threw it out the window. And we said, this is what we need to do. And in leadership and in ministry and missions work and all of these things, we talk about the word flexible, being flexible and making changes. I would even add the word audible. So if you are a American football fan, it's when you go up to the line of scrimmage, you have a great plan. You have the best play picked out for that particular scenario. But when you get to the line, you see the defense is like this. Oh, they're like this. You say, "I'm going to audible this play from the play we thought was the best to what now we think is the best based off what's around us." And so in serving, you may have a plan, you may have a strategy, but you may say, "Oh, I need to audible to a new plan, a new strategy, and this is how we're going to serve." So the whole week we had speaking engagements, we had this and that, but we actually rewired the whole church. I had an electrical engineer on my team when we didn't realize we were going to do electrical work, and we rewired the church. We helped them do a renovation of this. We wound up doing this, and our whole plan changed because we took the time and we said, "We're here to serve you." That's one thing in our mottos, in our vision and philosophy of Global Infusion, way back when we talked about that at the very beginning, is short-term strengthens the long-term. So we're short-term mission teams. A lot of people will debate, well, what's the value of short-term missions? Oh, you're just there for a short time. What can you do? Our vision is our short-term strategies help the long-term vision of the people that live there and are serving there. So what did we do? We renovated the church. We renovated the electrical. We got to be a blessing. Now they don't have to worry about, is the power going to work when we have service? Is the lighting going to work? Is this going to work? Is kids ministry going to work? Because now we were able to take 1 week and have 6 guys. It was an all men's team because we were going to do a men's conference in Ukraine. And we got to plow the ground. And now they have no issues with their services. They have no issues with their lighting. They have no issues because we can simply serve them in the way they need to do. So I love servant leadership. I actually have another resource. We're going to give away 3 books today. We'll find a way to do a giveaway. But this is a phenomenal text. And this is called Cross-Cultural Servanthood. Dwayne Elmer. His stuff is incredible. We're going to give this book away as well today. If actually everything we're talking about is actually somewhat within this in a certain way, this is my favorite book to recommend to anybody. So I'm recommending it to all of you. Find this book, phenomenal read, short read, simplistic read. We're going to give this away today as well. But he talks about all kinds of serving and servanthood. He's got some other books out there. They're awesome. I definitely recommend him. And serving is just a phenomenal thing that we get to do as believers, as leaders, as even just human beings. I can tell you, if you read this book, it'll help your marriage. It'll help you as a father, a mother. It'll help you as a leader. It's got a holistic approach. It will help you revolutionize how you think about all different kinds of things in life. So I definitely recommend that book.
Great. Now, I think this time around, many people have really think that serving is something that is unappetizing or something that is not really, glamorized by our culture, and by this generation for some reason or one way or another. But what is that one thing that you've learned from all of your experiences, not only with your mission trips, but in your life? What is that one mind blowing thing that you have learned
Hmm.
about serving that really changed your life?
Okay, so I'm gonna steal a chapter out of this book,
Mhm.
and it's called The Robe or the Towel. And it talks about the story of Christ and how in John, when he washed the disciples' feet, this is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords we're talking about. And before his departure, what did he do? He took on the robe, or he took on the towel. He could have took on the robe. This is the King of Kings. He could have worn a crown and been this royal king. But what did he do? He said, no, I am the Son of God, but I've come to serve. So he takes the towel and he goes around and washes the disciples' feet. And this is such a humbling experience because in this time, they didn't have nice shoes. The ground was mainly dirt. The feet were the dirtiest part of the body. And so the lowest of lowest servant was a foot washing servant. And so what did Christ do? He said, I'm going to humble myself to this. So practically speaking, what have I learned about serving? Serving is sometimes taking the dirtiest of dirty jobs, the one job that no one wants to do, and says, I am going to take that job and I'm going to do it because I value that. I value the people around you. And I know that that's needed. So, for example, in a church, you have maybe restrooms, bathrooms, washrooms, and no one wants to wash them. And you say, I'm going to wash them because you can't have a service or you can't have a business or you can't have that without a bathroom or something like that. And so you say, I'm going to take the dirtiest of jobs and I'm going to do it. And so it's humbling ourselves to the lowest of the simplest positions and saying, I value that I want to use a clean restroom. I want to use a clean bathroom, washroom. And so in leadership, that can look very different for each one of us. But what I share with you today is Christ did that. Christ modeled that. He didn't model a life of sitting on a throne, wearing a robe, wearing a crown. He said, no, I'm going to wear a towel. I'm going to take a wash basin and a towel, and I'm going to wash my disciples' feet. And he basically said, what you see me doing, you will continue to do and go and do likewise. And so it's an amazing challenge for us, inspiring for us to go and just have a great time in life and ministry and be a blessing. But blessing involves serving.
Man, that is so good. I'm really learning a lot. How I wish bless has more letters in it. But
Yeah.
now we're down to the last S, to the last letter of the word bless. So we have B, begin with prayer. L, listen. E, eat. And then S, serve. And then what is the last to
So
close this
the last one
bless?
is share your story. So specifically, well, we could talk leadership, and then we can narrow it down to the biblical component of this. So in the leadership side of this is sharing our story. So people love to hear stories. People love to hear testimonies. So for example, a lot of times leaders didn't become a leader overnight. It took hard times. It took long hours. It took rough experience. It took taking risk. Well, oftentimes we never get to hear those stories. We just think, oh, wow, they're this high and mighty person, and they just have always been that way. Well, it's not that case. So, for example, I'll share a story from our local pastor here. So, our local pastor here is 37 years in ministry. Started in a school cafeteria with like 7 or 8 people, not many. And then he couldn't even get enough money to raise his own salary. He's had to sell cars on the side. He had to work long hours. He had to travel. He did all these things. Well, now you look at him and, well, he's a pastor of 1,000 people. Well, yeah, 1,000 is an awesome number. That was 37 years of hard work, hard labor. And he's got story after story on how he wanted to give it up, how he wanted to quit, this and that. And he could have done all of those things. But it's amazing when you get to hear the stories all throughout. So that's kind of one component is share your story. As a leader, share your story, because that can be the inspiring thing that pushes somebody to continue with what they're going through. On a very biblical level, Revelations 12:11, we are overcomers by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So the blood of the Lamb was taken care of 2,000 years ago. Thank you, Lord, dying on the cross for us, giving us eternal life, forgiving us our sins, giving us all these things. But the beauty is God wants us to be a part of the story. He chose us to be instruments of his truth, and we get to share our testimony. Each one of us is given a unique story and a unique testimony, and we get to share that with those around us. Some of our testimonies will connect exactly with someone else in another country, another place, and some of our stories won't connect. But the beautiful thing is we all are made in the image of God with a very unique story, but our stories are encouragement to other people. Oftentimes people will say, or in my world religions classes that I've taken in the university level, they'll talk about how do you talk with somebody of another faith? How do you talk with somebody of another faith? One of the most powerful things you can do is share your story. You can share, this is what happened in my life. Now you can say, the Bible says this, the Bible says this, the Bible says this, and I do, and I use that. But oftentimes people will counter it. Well, my thing says this, my thing says that. Well, what makes one more powerful than the other? That you could talk about that all day, but you can't say, oh, that the Bible is false, or this is false, or that's false. Because when you say, this is my story, this is what God has done for me, you can't take that story away from somebody. You can't say, well, that didn't happen. It did happen. So for example, 1 month ago, actually, I was traveling to Texas, my family, and I had a really bad accident with my eye. Just a freak accident happened in the middle of doing something for my son, and a section of my cornea was ripped out of my eye. It's just an actual chunk. And it was extremely painful. I had to go to the emergency room right away. And the guy said, you might as well go back home. You will be in so much pain for like 3 to 5 days, 7 days a week. You will be in so much pain. And it was extremely painful. I thought I was never going to be able to see again out of my eye. And we sent out a message to all of our pastors and friends and staff and all of our family. And within 1 day, less than 24 hours, everybody was praying, and instantly I had a miracle. I mean, I had my eye
Wow.
taped shut, and it was completely shut, and my eye was opening through the taping of it shut. And I took it off because it was actually hurting, because my lid was like open. I took the tape off and I instantly could see, no problems. I was like, I just experienced a miracle. And some people will say, well, miracles don't happen. Well, that miracle truly happened for me. I literally, within hours of people praying, because we didn't actually get to send it out till the next morning. Just I was in the emergency room and all these moving parts, and we told small family and stuff like that, but we didn't get a chance to tell like our prayer support team, our war room, our people that we war for us, and we call that in war room and prayer. And we sent it out that morning. So we're talking like 9 o'clock in the morning. By noon, 3 hours later, I had already been completely healed. Well, some people are like, well, miracles don't happen. Well, it happened for me. The doctor yesterday at 3 p.m. said you need to fly back home and go to an optometrist and all of this thing and get your eyes checked out, and you could get an infection and you could lose your vision. Within 3 hours of that prayer request, I was healed, and that all glory be to God. And I thank all those that invested in prayer for me. But now I have a whole new outlook on praying for people, especially with eyes, and all of these things, because I have a testimony to share.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go places, I get to share the love and the story of Christ, but I get to share testimonies. This is a new thing that I get to share when I
Mm-hmm.
travel overseas. And it's an opportunity that I get to glorify and honor God, say, thank you, Lord, for healing and touching my body. And so no one could take that away from me. You could try to say that didn't happen. Well, I've got ER bills that I'm paying and this and that and all of this. And it says, I'm healed. I went to the optometrist 1 week later. He said, your vision is perfect.
Wow.
No issues, no long-term damage. But now this is a testimony of my life that I get to share with others. So as a leader, we say, when we get the opportunity, especially with eating, when we go out to eat with people, we should always be sharing stories. I love hearing stories. The Bible itself is one grand narrative. It's an amazing story. But we remember stories. And so in our leadership, we need to tell others that are following us, others around us, the stories and the things that have gone on so that they can experience similar things. If you are interested in the book giveaway from our podcast today, please contact the warroomdesk@gmail.com and 3 winners will be randomly selected. Please include your name, email, and country of residence in the email, and in the subject line, include War Room Book Giveaway. We will reach out to the 3 winners in January of 2023. You must be living in a country that Amazon is deliverable to be eligible for this book giveaway. Enjoy the books. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you in our next episode. If you like this podcast, please click the follow button and hit the bell button to get updates on our new episodes. If you are brand new and wish to partner with us, please email us at thewarroomdesk@gmail.com. thewarroomdesk@gmail.com. We would also like to take the opportunity to thank all of our sponsors who made this podcast possible. If you're interested to support us, please click the sponsor link in the show notes. Always remember, love deeper, live stronger, lead better. See you next time in the War Room.